First ever virtual Democratic National Convention is over. Former Vice President Joe Biden took the spotlight Thursday night, accepting his party's nomination for U.S. President and laying out his vision for the country. Next week, it'll be the Republicans' turn to make their case on why Donald Trump should remain in office. Joining us to talk about all of it is Donald Kettl. He's a professor at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin. He's also a senior fellow at the Volcker Alliance, the Brookings Institution, and the Partnership for Public Service. Donald, thanks for being on the program. Let me begin with the speech everyone is talking about, Joe Biden's speech, which by all accounts seemed to exceed expectations. Did he succeed in making the case?
Well, it was a remarkable speech, in part because it was, in fact, a good speech. The commentary, for the most part, suggests it was probably the best speech he's ever given. But on top of that, he far exceeded the expectations that the Republicans had set for him. They made a serious strategic error in suggesting that it would be difficult for him to put one foot in front of another in a speech like that. And he really did a terrific job on that. He really did what he needed to do, which is to establish himself, introduce himself, and lay out a vision for the country.
And the attacks that you mentioned by Republicans, by Donald Trump, basically questioning his mental sharpness, if you will, could attacks like that end up backfiring on the Republicans?
In my mind, at least from the point of view of the Republicans' efforts to try to beat Biden, it was a serious mistake, because the more that you suggest that he just doesn't have, that is, Biden doesn't have the mental acuity to be able to be president of the United States, to run a good campaign, every time he succeeds is evidence that goes to the contrary. And so it's strategically a really serious mistake on their part to be able to do that. And of course, it sets the stage for the same question to be flipped back to the Republicans. Can the Republicans run a campaign? Can they run a convention that was as effective as the Democrats was? And
I want to get to that in just a moment, but I also want to get your reaction to what we heard from President Trump and Vice President Pence, who criticized the four-day event, calling it the darkest, angriest ever convention. Did you get the feel that it was all gloom and doom?
Certainly wasn't all gloom and doom, but there was plenty of dark stuff there. And in fact, the key to Biden's speech last night was beginning with darkness, but then in Biden's mind, pivoting to the light. It was that contrast that the Democrats were trying to make, that in fact they were suggesting that Trump was the source of darkness, and that to be able to push that away, to be able to shine the light on American politics again, means electing Joe Biden. So in many ways, the Republicans today are trying to flip the argument that Biden was making in his acceptance speech last night.
One of the highlights we've been seeing during these past 4 days are really the personal stories, personal challenges, losses, including this 13-year-old boy from New Hampshire, Braden Harrington, who said he was inspired by Vice President Biden because he too had a stutter, a very touching moment. So many touching moments like this we saw during the DNC.
About a few months ago, I met him in New Hampshire. He told me that
Donald, are you there?
The same club.
I am here, and that was remarkable. Just as we listened carefully to what it is that he said, the fact that Biden was able to inspire a 13-year-old boy, and that in that inspiration came that remarkable moment in the speech last night that he gave, just amazing, I think, on top of that. And it was that kind of personal touch that Biden is trying to make. The fact that Biden, regardless of what anyone may say in terms of criticism, has this personal touch, this personal connection that was a highlight of what the convention was really focusing on, and a highlight of last night's activity. So that's clearly going to be one of the very big things that the Biden campaign tries to move on as they move now out of this effort.
And we also saw a number of Republicans speak at the convention this week. Are we going to see Democrats perhaps speak at the RNC next week?
I think that's unlikely at this point. The Democrats were trying to make a point that they're reaching across the aisle. The Republicans are going to be working very hard on trying to mobilize their base, but that really highlights the big problem, in many ways the very biggest challenge that the Republicans have as they go into their convention. That is, can they succeed in mobilizing swing voters? The Republicans cannot win if they focus only on Trump's core base. They need swing voters. And so the big question for next week is, Can they succeed in mobilizing them? They're not going to be reaching to Democrats, but they need those swing voters. And the question is, can they get them?